Make we talk about ethics, truth over aesthetics. Welcome to the Ethics Talk Show. Welcome to the Ethics Talk Show. Make we talk about ethics, truth over aesthetics.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Ethic Talk Show. In this episode 2, we are going to talk about normative ethical theories.
So, we're going to get into normative ethics. And first, we need to understand what is normative ethics. So, normative ethics is the branch of philosophical ethics that investigates how one ought to act, establishing moral standards and norms to distinguish right from wrong. It focuses on defining virtuous character, duties, or consequences to guide behavior, moving beyond description to prescribing ethical conduct. So some key frameworks include consequentialism, deontology, virtue ethics, which you'll hear about throughout the talks. And when you hear normative ethics, I want you to think about how people ought to act. So normative equals to how we ought to act. It usually explores questions like, is lying always wrong or only sometimes? Do the ends justify the means? So if life is a stage, normative ethics is the scriptwriter telling you what kind of actions may make you the hero or the villain. So you decide what you want to do. So we're going to move now into consequentialism under normative ethics.
Well, consequentialism under normative ethics is a theory that emphasizes more on consequences. So the belief of consequentialism is that for a moral action to be right, to be judged right or wrong, it has to be maximize pleasure and minimize pain. In that case, whenever an action succeeds the maximization of the pleasure, then it is morally right. But if an action minimizes the pleasure and maximizes the pain, that is to be judged morally wrong. And this theory is very interesting for me. Like living in the community, as for all of us, sometimes we meet each other in the school, and like for us as a brother, as the brothers in the house, most of the time in decision making, sometimes we use this theory. For example, we seek the goodness or the benefit, the outcome of the decision that we are going to take. It has to benefit a greater number of people in the community. So if in the community, a decision that we are making, it doesn't benefit a, a greater number of people, then the superior or a brother, whoever is that who is going to make decision, is not going to make it because he knows the consequences that it will bring about. So in that case, I will say this theory is very applicable in the real life.
So basically, as long as the pleasure outweighs the pain.
Yes.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So what is the other one under normative ethics now? Other maybe?
Another one is deontological ethics. For deontological ethics, it is a duty, is a moral-based duty, whereby this ethics is associated by a philosopher called Immanuel Kant, whereby it is all about the duty. And for a deontological ethics is originated from the Greek word called deon, meaning duty, whereby the principle of Immanuel Kant says that anyone ought to act in a way that it is universally universal law. So, for example, for deontology, uh, killing like the innocent and or stealing, regardless of the consequence, for the deontology to what work out. For example, me personally, who is working with the vulnerable, who is working with the marginalized, because these marginalized people, these poor people, they have the right to live, and so they need to be defended. They have the right of dignity. So this rule, this duty, I can say that it tends to preserve life and the dignity of humanity. Yes.
Okay. So now we'll be speaking on virtue ethics.
So yes, virtue ethics. Now, virtue ethics is an ethical theory that focuses on moral character rather than rules or consequences. So instead of asking what actions are right or wrong, virtue ethics asks what kind of person someone should strive to become, right? So this theory is strongly associated with the popular, well-known figure Aristotle, who believed that moral behavior comes from developing virtues, which are positive character traits such as honesty, courage, kindness, and wisdom. These virtues are formed through practice and habit over time. Aristotle went on to explain that virtue involves finding balance, an idea known as the golden mean. This means that virtue exists between two extremes. For example, courage lies between cowardice and recklessness. Right? So a virtuous person learns to act appropriately depending on the situation. Virtue ethics emphasizes personal growth and moral development, encouraging individuals to cultivate good character so that ethical actions naturally flow from who they are. Right. So then we move on to
moral ethics. So, following the moral rights. In the moral rights, we talk about the individual, about their freedom and entitlements. So everybody has that moral rights. So if it is about the privacy to own things. So, for example, if I want to be treated as a respectful, I should first respect others so that they be able to respect me. So it is about the privacy. So when you treat others in a good manner, it always help you build up yourselves good way. In that moral rights, it helps individual to think and to be able to react in a good way.
So throughout all of this talking and discussion, from episode 1 to episode 2, all about everything that we've talked about ethics, everything that we've learned about ethics, whether here or at class or just everyday life, how would you say ethics has now impacted your way of thinking or your life, or what have you learned in class that you'll take on into code? So we can start here and just go down to further institutions.
well, for me, ethics has taught me a lot, especially on the topic of
Moral rights.
moral rights. I truly believe that, for me, example, coming from a all boys school formerly, there are a lot of occasions where things will happen. Like, people will say certain things and it throw you off and anger gets built up and that tends to lead to fights and, so on. But, based on what my brother here just said, it really speaks about what can be really done to solve those issues. And that's one of the most important things for me. Software turns the wrath away, that's the saying, right? So I truly believe that that's one of the main things ethics has taught me since this semester started.
For me, honestly, at first, I never really liked it or, got it. Ethics, it sounds boring. But the more I spoke with the brothers and the more I learned about ethics, is the more I began to appreciate it. Learning what is right from what is wrong. There are different ways to decide what is morally right and what is morally wrong. So for like when Brother Lazarus was talking about consequentialism, I really like that. Like, as long as the pleasure kind of outweighs the pain in our sense, it helps us to decide what is morally right and what's morally wrong, what benefits the people most. Just to make tough decisions. But yeah, as it got closer to the end, I really understood more ethics and the different theories and all that lovely stuff.
Yeah, for me also, the first time I was trying to understand what the teacher is trying to tell us. And so it really helps me. So I look at it in the way that it really good to build up that personality in way that if I respect the person, he can respect me. But if I treat him badly, in the same way to do me judgmental. So this really ethical theories help me a lot, especially in the normative ethics. It really will me have a strong foundation in a good relation with one another. So as we are here, like we welcoming each other, so it builds up good in between all of us. So I offer to the next.
Yes, ethic is, I may say ethic is everywhere,
Mm.
but I did not realize it until I started. Because even though when I was still a kid, actually there there were a lot of actions that ethically I do it. I do it. I did it ethically, but I did not distinguish which one is right and wrong, and which one is fall into this category of theories and whatever is that. I didn't know. But until the time that I had a chance to study this course of ethics, that's the time I come to know and I reflect. I recall back all those experiences that I have done in the past, and I put them, like, I organize them in the categories. Oh, this action was fall into this theory. This action in that theory. And this is, and then I come to see that how there is a lot of benefits that we can take from ethics, studying ethics. And in my part, I may say I'm grateful to having this course, learn about what I I ought to behave or I ought to do, and to judge an action morally right or wrong. I have to learn some principle of ethical principle that I can apply it in the real life, in everyday life. And that's what I can say about the experience that I have experienced.
Yeah, well, likewise, I have learned much on this course of ethics, and having known much about the theories, because in my place, my parents used to talk about the morality, but they never emphasize, or I never knew about the names of these theories, and especially talking about the the deontological, the 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 rules that are inherently the dignity of a person, that I ought to to preserve life. Then on the same part, on the other hand, the consequentialism, because there are sometimes you cannot rely on the duties only. There are some parts that you can go to the consequentialism, the utilitarianism, because, for example, somebody who is driving on the road and there's somebody who is dying, and the rules say that you should not overtake. So that's where utilitarians will enter inside and somebody will overtake to save life. So for this, I have learned much on this course. Yes,
Great,
please.
great. So we can all say that we've learned a lot in ethics and we'll take it on to, in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, pass it on. So thank you for sitting with us, for hearing us. Hopefully you learned something about ethics or, we've lit a spark in you to learn more about ethics. Bye.
Thank you.
Make we talk about ethics, truth over aesthetics. Welcome to the Ethics Talk Show. Welcome to the Ethics Talk Show. Make we talk